What's happening? Today we're going to do a passover on quarter 3 planning. Now, there's a number of words that people throw around to accomplish this sort of thing. Strategy formulation, strategic planning, defining our quarterly rocks, business objectives, planning horizon. It can get kind of weird with the vocabulary assigned. What I'm going to do is try to break down the best practice and frameworks to the most fundamental level that we can apply as operators in the real world. So buckle up, let's dive in. Welcome to another video. My name is Logan Skis. This is the Venture Map. A little bit about myself. I am a family guy. My wife and I have two awesome kids, and their likenesses redacted for anti-deepfake purposes, but they are amazing. So I spend the majority of my time with my awesome family. When I'm not doing that, I'm working on defining business models with my clients through our school community. Venture Map, we've got a free community. You're welcome to jump in, join. All the templates, techniques, prompts, stuff like that is in there. So we can help you get spun up really quick and easy. Before I was a family man, I served in the Marines. I had the privilege of deploying to Afghanistan twice in the infantry. Good times. That was kind of the start of my career. After that, I had a transition into the fitness world, and that exposed me to a love not just for wellness and for a disciplined application of theory into practice, but for business. And very quickly, I was exposed to that world through educators at Florida Atlantic University. And that got me handed a really cool medal from then Governor Rick Scott and the Florida cabinet at the time. And my career progressed from the Marines to the business management side of the fitness industry and supporting the launch and development of a gym, working with Florida Army National Guard and reserve components with fitness technology. That was a really interesting part of the journey that opened my eyes. Working with the military from the outside was awesome. And I continue to go down the rabbit hole into fitness technology. And that's where my story pivoted pretty abruptly into my current work, which is all about terrain modeling for businesses. You see, right at the beginning of the COVID lockdowns, we were in the process of raising a seed round for a fitness technology startup. And very quickly, we found out that the COVID-19 lockdowns had other plans. So the angel investors and advisors that we were working with at the time said, you guys need to pivot. If you can find a way to generate revenue and survive this, you should definitely do it. And the doors all shut pretty quickly. At the time, we were pretty spread out in terms of our plans and what we were trying to do. It was going to require some dedicated technical expertise that I, as a founder, did not inhabit. But what we did decide to do was to use some of the things we learned in the Marine Corps to make it make sense to adapt and overcome to the rapidly changing environment that we were thrown into. So I said we should map out everything that we know how to do and use that as a sort of a war room to move fast. And we did that. And in fact, very quickly, some other founders saw what we were doing and wanted us to help them. And that's how I bridged out of the fitness industry into what is now fractional COO work. I've had the pleasure of serving as a fractional integrator or second in command for a number of small business owners. It's been the greatest challenge, but the most rewarding thing of my entire career thus far. We spent years seeking to understand this idea of how do we visually depict the realities of a business in a single virtual environment. And if you consider a military terrain model is one that does just that. It holistically captures and visualizes the realities within an operational environment. We were obsessed then, and even more so now, with that idea. So the Venture Map has a number of domains that we can evaluate. If you haven't seen any of the things I've covered previously, I've got a number of trainings on my YouTube channel, but also inside of our free community, again, where you can join us for the journey of mapping out your business, getting strategic clarity, and ramping up what's most important, which is the execution of that strategy. We leverage AI automations and narrow field offshore specialists in order to give small business owners and solopreneurs the ability to punch above their weight class. So that's a little bit about me. That's why I'm here. And what we're going to talk about today is the Q3 planning horizon. Now, when you consider the fact that a quarter is 90 days, so every 90 days, every 3 months, we have this turnover of sorts of time. From an operations management perspective, one of the things we like to talk about is bookending time on a daily, on a weekly, monthly, and quarterly basis. We basically capture what we've done and project forward what needs to get done. So we bookend. The quarterly planning session is one of the most important for integrating a longer term vision into a shorter term operations plan and to actually getting stuff done in the real world to move you closer to your goals. We're going to walk through a little bit of this process today. This is the same process that I walked through my clients and the elite community for VentureMap and our operator tier clients that I work hand in hand with over the course of months, in many cases, years, to build a self-optimizing enterprise. Now, we're going to cover three things: the current state, target state, and how to close the gap between the two. They say a picture's worth 1,000 words. We're going to just zip into this. When we consider anything to do with planning, with defining objectives, with capturing a desired or target state, this is a classic model that does a lot in terms of driving home the big idea. You can imagine yourself standing out on the beach, looking out towards the horizon, and perhaps there's a buoy 100 yards offshore, and then there's a boat 500 yards offshore, and then finally, all the way in the distance, it's that infinitely curious, almost mysterious horizon line where the sky and the surface of the water touch. You can see it, but in the same way, it's hard to fully distinguish. That's an interesting way to create an analogy for time. We're always in the current moment, not just in a philosophical way, but in a eminently practical way. It's always now. So when we sit down with the discipline of quarterly planning, we have to define that current state. And there's going to be, we're going to pull out a quick tool and prompt for you to use to define that current state quickly and with AI's help. Stay tuned for that. Also, if you haven't yet liked or subscribed, go ahead and hit that now. It really helps the channel grow. And also, it helps us know what sort of content moves the needle for you in the real world. Now, we're going to look at the current state, how to define that, and we're also going to look at our desired or target state. I use those terms interchangeably. Much like standing out on the ocean looking forward into the distance, we're going to do that with our vision, with our strategic planning, and we're going to put a flag in the sand, or we're going to plant that buoy at the specific distance away from us and define it as clearly as we can within the time constraints allotted. Advanced moves, for those of you other curious souls, this space between the current and target state, you can basically start breaking it down in two ways. One is the gap analysis. This is something management consultants will typically work with their clients on, is to, once we have a clear picture on where we're at, where we're going, we'll define the gap in no uncertain terms. An important part of that is to have the specific variables that we use to define our current state really clear, and then match those with the variables in our desired state. So then we can understand the delta, we can understand the missing pieces, what has to actually change from a qualitative and quantitative standpoint. That's just a quick overview on some advanced stuff we would typically reserve for those who are like going full bore into this process. And then, we would produce and craft implementation plans to actually build our capabilities, expand our overall capacity, increase our market share, further differentiate ourselves, and build and reinforce our moat and these sorts of things. So that would be some of the advanced view on what happens between the two of those. If you're interested in a further breakdown, let me know in the comments. Let's dive into part one, current state. F. Scott Fitzgerald, the novelist most famously known for his work in The Great Gatsby, says that the test of a first-rate intelligence is the ability to hold two opposed ideas in the mind at the same time and still retain the ability to function. It's such a great anchor point in my view. That's why I wanted to start with this. You can imagine the the weight of gravity and the stability requirements for a Cirque du Soleil tightrope walker. If you ever seen one of those acts, it's unbelievable. And they have to simultaneously move forward while feeling the pull and the lean of the forces of gravity on both sides of their pole, right? Or of their arms in some cases. It's not unlike that for us as operators and as founders. You can imagine day to day moving through the requirements of growing a business, of executing within its operations. On the one hand, we have our large vision, we have our picture of the future, the thing we have to do, whether that's a planning horizon of multiple years, multiple months, or even in some cases, multiple hours. We have some level of intent and theory and strategy about the future. And we have to balance that with how to maintain an eminently practical, pragmatic, capabilities-based stance against what we can actually do, what the constraints and our current bandwidth allow us to do in the real world. That without falling into the rabbit hole that both of those two things provide. We have to span that gap. We have to balance between those two forces and continue moving forward simultaneously. That's the hallmark of a great mind, and I would argue of a great operator slash founder. Now, building upon this idea is a professor at Yale. His name is John Lewis Gaddis. He wrote a great book, one of my favorites, called On Grand Strategy. And Gaddis talks about, in the same way that a great mind is defined by its ability to hold two opposing ideals while maintaining effective function, Gaddis says great strategy, grand strategy, he says, is found at the intersection of aspirations and capabilities. Now, this is a little bit technical, but I would agree with him in his word choice. I think there's actually no better words to define this idea. I brought in a definition to expand on this. Gaddis's exact words are the alignment of potentially unlimited aspirations with necessarily limited capabilities. What that means is aspirations represent the goals or desired outcomes, which can be limitless and even imaginative. Capabilities. Now, these are the resources, means, and conditions available to achieve those aspirations, which are always finite. The intersection. Strategy is the process of finding the most effective way to use limited capabilities to pursue desired aspirations. This means balancing what you want with what you have and adjusting goals to fit capabilities where necessary. In other words, boots on the ground, eyes on the sky. So we're going to go through our first question, and we're actually only asking two in this video, so we've already made it halfway there. The first big question is about our capabilities, and I would say, walk me through a typical client engagement from first inquiry through delivery and follow-up. What are the key steps you take? Who's involved? People or partners? Which tools or systems you use, and which outcomes or metrics you track at each stage. And what I want you to do is to just, if you haven't, just pause the video and scratch out an answer. Jot it down in your phone, write it out in your notebook, or even better, you could join the Venture Map free community on School and go through the intake sequence. I'm skipping a little bit ahead to the end, a sneak peek here. We have a sequence and automation that you can just answer these questions directly in, and it'll produce the first version of the required deliverables for you to actually reflect on, share with your team, and apply in the real world. So once you've answered this question, we're going to go ahead and move on. We'll look at our target state. Now, there are innumerable ways to capture the target state. I've intentionally selected a framework that I think is so elegant in its simplicity and effective in its utility. And it comes from none other than Donald Miller. Don Miller is the guy behind the brand script, the guy behind Story Brand, Business Made Simple. He is a legend. He is ubiquitous when it comes to narrative and business. He's got a fantastic series of books. His online academy, Business Made Simple University, is spot on. It's legit. So all credit to him for this format. I'll finish by just adding one additional point. The parallels that Don Miller's internal or operations focused mission statement, he's got a specific word for it. I believe they call it the 4-point mission, internal mission map. The parallels that he has with this framework and what I experienced firsthand in the Marine Infantry is pretty significant. A lot of times in the business world, you'll hear people talk about their mission, and it's fluffy and flowery and abstract and feel good, and it's a very forgettable to start, and it's one of those like cool bro type of things, like great, now what, what's next. But in the Marine Corps, as an example, when we're conducting a village raid, and we have a mission briefing, that's like anything but abstract. It's anything but flowery and feel good. It's eminently practical. That's the word that comes up. Eminently practical. It is who is going to do what, where, why, and how. And there's a very well-defined series of processes that take place in order to define a mission briefing and deliver it and follow through with the execution of one and adapt it in the real world. So I do think, and I point that parallel out because I think the most effective things are often it's not always the most true things that are true in a way that transcends individual circumstances, that underpins all human endeavor, not just one type of business model within one type of industry at a certain size and certain time and a certain sector. It's something that underpins human endeavor at a level of first principles. So I think that a lot of this approach is if not exactly that, it's certainly close. All right. His framework essentially goes, we will achieve, like an action word, 3 economic goals by time constraint in order to tie in with our purpose. And that's me paraphrasing a little more detail. It's basically a action statement that says we will grow or launch or reduce or expand, then integrates in 3-ish economic goals or number quantifiable targets like revenue, profit margin, monthly reoccurring revenue, units, etc., and then holds that back within a deadline, within a time constraint, and then it talks about how we know it will be finished. We also, deeper into the course, it talks about tying that back into your purpose. Here's a few just real quick examples because the words and formulas together can kind of get difficult to track. Pet grooming. We will increase mobile grooming appointments from 40 to 70 by end of September, so that we can grow monthly revenue from 12K to 21K and hire a second groomer. One more, Tutoring Co. We will enroll 25 new one-on-one math and science students by the end of September, so we can generate 50K in Q3 tuition revenue and launch our first small group cohort. Right, these sort of things. You can see the framing of this. So there's our action word, and then it's secure 20 new residential maintenance contracts by September. There's our time constraint. So we will add 80K, and there's our outcome. So we've got in these examples, you can see we've got one economic objective, we've got one economic objective, time constraint, desired outcome. So it can be more than that one, but it also could certainly just fall down into that. Okay, so we're going to push forward into the second question, and this is where I want you to pause the video again and answer it. Just scratch it down. It should be ugly and quick. Try not to overthink it. ChatGPT or the AI of your choice can do the overthinking way better than you can. So just leave that to the LLM. You do what you're best at, what humans are best at, which is going from 0 to 1, transmuting what was implicit in tribal knowledge, the vision of the numinous, the thing out into the future, reach into the realm of potential and pull out something in the material form from mind to matter. That's what you have to do. You can have an ugly, rough cut, a scratched out rendition of this. Don't overstress the framework, just get it down. All right, aspirations. Using Miller's 4-point mission map template, how would you complete this internal mission statement to nail down your end of quarter target state? We will verb plus measurable goals by exact date, so that's strategic mission / payoff. For me personally, I like to reference. Here is a previous version of mine. I am an aesthetics guy, so I like having a picture that makes me think and just feel that space and help kind of bring this more to life in a visceral way. So I'm like bullet point listing here. I don't have any pretenses whatsoever about offending anybody with butchering the framework or the pure form methodology. So you do you, in other words. All right. Now you've got that down. You should have a real quick scratch out. If it's a line for your capabilities and a line for your aspirations, you should have those things by now. We're going to look at the third thing now, which is closing the gap. We've got our current state, we've got our target state, and we've got the gap between the two. We've got to close it. How do we do it? Well, first of all, asynchronous intake. Async intake. If you don't know what async is, it's a word that defines uncoupling of live time. It's existed since the earliest days of history, sending letters, sending emails, leaving a voice message, shooting over a text. These types of things are asynchronous because you're sending a communication that is not synchronous, that's not connected in sync in real time with the receiving party. These days, their async communications is quite advanced, and specifically with our ability to visually collaborate, so we show and tell, and leverage generative AI to support the production. It's kind of like next level performance is unlocked when you tap into that async space. It's not just what we can do live, it's what we do in between our live times that matter. Oftentimes the live time is just for briefing, debriefing, alignment, discussion, problem solving, and then the time in between that is actually deep work. So what you want to do is flush out your full growth plan. Having a version 1 capabilities model, having a version 1 rough cut of your mission, operations focused mission statement or internal mission map, as Miller calls it, is cool, but it will be enough in a pinch to keep you going to the whole quarter, but there's certainly some more that could be done to help reduce risk and uncertainty. And in order to just drive home this point, I want to introduce you to something I talk about called the founder's cycle or the CEO cycle. And it's a three-phase process that goes, it starts with insight, moves to decision, and completes with action, then completes the cycle. What you'll find is whether it's a briefing video like this, a live work session with a colleague, peer, coach, etc., or team member, there's always going to be some input from the environment, some sort of opportunity to gain insight. That can be from collateral, like a virtual physical deliverable, something we've identified in the environment through patterns of behavior. So it could be soft, like that. It doesn't necessarily need to be pixels and material. It can be patterns of behavior. It can be trends. It can be thoughts, right? So, but what will always occur is there's an opportunity to see the signal in the noise to gain insight. Gaining insight is a vital and inescapable precursor to decision making. And I'll pull it out of the philosophical very quickly and just bring it to that eminently practical space. You're in the gym. You have no idea what you're going to do, but you know you got to work out. You go into the gym, and what do most people do? They look around, they see the treadmill, and in a split second, they think, I'm going to do that. And they just walk to the treadmill and click start, right? Hit start. Even that low level intent, low level of insight uh, enables that cycle, and it demonstrates that cycle. So it could be all the way regarding the insight space. You could slide the scale all the way to the left. There's no material expression of the plans. The maturity of that process or the sophistication of the process deriving insight is very limited. It's very low fidelity, and the cycle time is very quick. There's a treadmill, going to execute. Likewise, most operators, most practitioners in the small business world are much the same way. They wake up, they know they've got a rough idea of what has to occur. They know they've got to do something. They show up and they just see a problem and they fix it. They see a problem, they fix it, and they just execute primarily reactively. And that is required a lot of the time. That opportunistic, instinctually driven, visionary, relentless bias towards action is a hallmark for many successful operators, certainly in the early days. But it's not to say that there's not many levels above that for how we can conduct analysis and carefully distinguish the signal to the noise. But regardless of the fidelity, the resolution, the quality of the insight, it'll always inform a decision. That decision can be deliberated over painstakingly for weeks. It can be something that's made internally in a matter of a second. And from there, what follows is action, whether it's us walking up to the gym machine to actually do the reps, whether it's us spotting a metaphorical fire in our business that needs to be put out, or whether it's something that's very consciously selected within the overall grand strategy of our business and executed on methodically through a deep work session. We're always going to execute. There's always the action, has to have action. Without it, we're in trouble. After action is what feeds insight. For example, once you finish walking on the treadmill and you've got 45 minutes of a workout left, you're going to look over and see the dumbbells or the bands or the pull down machine, and the process repeats itself. We're in that loop all the time. It's a reality loop. And it relates, again, this is one of those things that are true at a fundamental level. The application of this transcends the individual use case of small business, of fitness, and it is more along the lines of an underpinning for all human endeavor and experience. So now we'll finish with the action item. Complete the growth plan intake. The growth plan intake is a a series of questions, two of which we've just captured. There's a few more if you want to go all the way through the growth plan intake. And this is something that should take about 10, maybe 15 minutes tops. And that's if you're preparing. If you just go through it, shooting from the hip, you could finish it within a few minutes. So the effort and sacrifice is pretty low here for you. And the outcome is actually pretty high because we're going to do what previously would take a massive amount of time, energy, and expertise, not to mention a commensurate investment to allocate all of those resources into producing a next level growth plan for you. All you have to do is jump into the free community and book a one-on-one call with me. I'll get you access to the questions, the sequence, all of that. It's all in the free community. And I'll even throw in a few of our production credits. These are the same production credits that our operator clients and elite members have access to in support of developing their self-optimizing enterprises with our AI COO platform. So if you want to take the next steps, which I highly encourage you to, get a new battle buddy, join the VentureMap community, and I look forward to seeing you on the inside. Thanks again. Logan out.